Hi, this is Nir Eyal, author of this book, Indistractable: How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, and I am thrilled to answer one of your questions. So let's dive in. While reading Indistractable, I was shocked to know that willpower cannot be depleted. There's a part that says if your phone's home screen is messy with apps, your cognitive ability is wasted. In Korean, the pronunciation of willpower and cognitive ability are very similar. So I was wondering, what is the main difference between these two concepts? Does cognitive ability have no limits like willpower? If not, is there any way to recover cognitive power? Of course, translations are always tricky, but I think what the concept here that I wanted to get across is that while willpower is not a depletable resource, meaning that it only depletes if we believe we are out of willpower, if we believe that we spend up all our willpower, cognitive ability in the form of attentional control, meaning your ability to think about one thing at a time, is a limited resource. And this makes perfect common sense if you think about the fact that you can't listen to one podcast in one ear and another podcast in another ear. You can't watch two YouTube videos at the same time. You can't read two books or do two math problems at the same time, because in that respect, our cognitive ability is limited. However, willpower, this ability to do whatever we say we are going to do, is not limited unless, of course, we believe it is, and then we act in accordance with our beliefs. And so this is really important to remember that, and I discuss this in the book, Indistractable, that part of becoming indistractable requires us to reimagine our temperament, to not believe that we are somehow limited with these things that psychologists tell us are not limited resources. So when we think that we are addicted to technology, when we think we are unable to resist, that it's hijacked our brains, we act accordingly. But when we understand that willpower is not a limited resource, that we are in control of our time and our attention, we can choose the kind of life we want to live by becoming indistractable. This question is, as you mentioned in Indistractable, I understand the first step to becoming indistractable is to define our values about ourselves, our relationships, and our work. However, I have difficulty finding my life values as I've always lived according to other people's standards. Can you give me some advice on how to find these values in a specific way? Great question. So let's start with, what are values? What does that word even mean? Values are defined as the attributes of the person you want to become. Values are defined as attributes of the person you want to become. So as opposed to sitting down and doing some crazy exercise about, well, what are my values, which can be very difficult for most people to do, what I advise instead to do is to ask yourself a simple question. How would the person I want to become spend their time? Because remember, values are attributes of the person you want to become. So how would the person I want to become spend their day? And what I want you to do is to take out your calendar for the week ahead and ask yourself, how would the person you want to become spend their time? And then put that time in your schedule. And do that by turning your values into time, meaning in these three life domains of starting out with you are at the center of these three life domains. The next life domain is your relationships, and finally your work. So start by asking yourself, how would the person you want to become spend their time to take care of themselves? So exercise, proper sleep, meditation, prayer, hey, even video games, whatever is important to you to spend your time taking care of yourself according to your values. Put that time in your calendar. Put time for those specific tasks in your calendar. The second step is your relationships. How would the person you want to become spend their time with other people? How much time would you spend talking to your friends, your parents, your siblings, whatever it is that's important to you, community activities? How much time would the person you want to become spend on those type of activities, investing in their relationships? And I want you to book that time on your calendar as well. And then finally, last, your work. How much time would the person you want to become spend on different work activities? Now, there are two types of work. We have reactive work and we have reflective work. Reactive work is reacting to things, right? The emails, the notifications, the phone calls, reacting to other people's requests. Now, that has to have some time on your calendar. Everybody's job does, but we need to allocate at least some time for that reflective work. The time to think, the time to concentrate, the time to plan and strategize. that time has to be spent without distraction. So to answer your question, how do you figure out your values? Don't start with some high-flying ideals. Start with how do you spend your time? Turn your values into time. This is how we become indistractable. Is it possible to experience traction unconsciously as we usually do with distraction? So great question. Let's back up and understand what the difference between traction and distraction actually is. Traction is defined as any action that moves you towards what you say you're going to do, moves you towards your values, helps you become the kind of person you want to become. The opposite of traction is distraction. Any action that moves you farther away from doing what you said you were going to do, farther away from your values, moves you farther away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. So what tends to happen with distraction is that we're not consciously aware that it's happening. Many times we say we're going to work on a big project. It's hard. We feel uncomfortable sensations that I call internal triggers that we seek to escape from. And somehow when we said we were going to work on that big assignment, somehow we're doing something else, like checking the news or scrolling Facebook or who knows what else, as opposed to what we said we were going to do, and we can fall off track. Now, the solution to that distraction is using the 4 steps of the indistractable model that I talk about in the book to help us stay on track. And these 4 steps are mastering those internal triggers, making time for traction, hacking back the external triggers, and preventing distraction with PACT. That 4th step is critical because that provides the firewall, the last line of defense, to make sure that if somehow we're not conscious about the distraction, we are not allowed to get distracted because we put steps in place to prevent us from going off track. But what about this question? Do we ever slip into traction? Not really. That traction requires conscious thought. It requires us to plan ahead. And in fact, anything that you want to do with your time, as long as you plan that time in advance, is wonderful. If you want to play video games, if you want to scroll Facebook, if you want to watch YouTube videos, wonderful. Do it, enjoy it, but do it with intent. The difference between traction and distraction is one word, and that one word is forethought. So the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. If doing that activity is important to you and in line with your values, plan that time, go ahead and do it, but make sure you do it on your schedule, not someone else's. Thank you, and good luck becoming indistractable.